All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Lunch with Lakers. My name is Ryan Palm, and I work in the alumni office at Mercyhurst. And for those that are joining us for the first time, welcome. We'll introduce our guest in just a minute, but a few housekeeping things to get out of the way before we get going. Lunch with Lakers is a weekly virtual series that we created to try and connect our alumni, parents, friends, prospective students with key people at Mercyhurst. We've featured faculty, administrators, students, and alumni, really trying to bring a little snippet of Mercyhurst to you in a time where you may not be able to actually visit the campus physically. We are excited to bring a variety of topics, and we have a few that we'll discuss today with our guest. Joining me today from our alumni team is Lindsay Frank. She is manning the chat function here on Zoom. So if you have questions, concerns, you can drop them in the chat. She is also posting links to places where you can learn more about past and future Lunch with Lakers. She'll post our email in there as well. So if you have any questions or suggestions for future attendees, we hope you will drop that to us via email as well. And feel free to send in a question for our guest at any point in the chat function. We will try and get to those as we go along, but please don't hesitate to send those in. So I think that's the laundry list of housekeeping things, and I want to go ahead and introduce our guest, Dave Armstrong. Dave is a graduate of the class of 1986, and we'll have him tell us a little bit about his experience at the school. We're really grateful for him taking the time to join us. Dave and his lovely wife, Leslie, are some of our greatest supporters. They are active on social media. They're very philanthropic. They attend a lot of events and really are some of our true favorite people that don the blue and green from time to time. So Dave, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate you being here. And we kind of start each of these conversations by asking you to tell us how you found Mercyhurst in the first place. What brought you to the school in the early 80s as a student?
Well, thanks, Ryan. And that's a lesson to anybody that's watching, that is, if you donate, Ryan's going to say great things about you. So always remember that. But no, Ryan, you do a great job. You and Lindsay and everybody at Mercyhurst and the alumni group. I'm honored to be here today. I mean, when you called or sent me the email, I was so excited because anytime I can do anything about and for Mercyhurst, I'm all in. And so thank you for having me on today. So it's actually kind of a funny story how I ended up at Mercyhurst. It comes down to two things: my high school football coach and Lake Chautauqua, New York. So my family, when I was 16 years old, 1979, bought a place up at Chautauqua Lake, New York. My dad owned his own business, worked very hard to build up a tool and die business. I'm a first generation college student. Okay, my parents did not get a college education, but they sacrificed so much in their life for us to get a faith-based education. 7 kids through K through 12, 4 of us through Catholic college, 2 of us at Mercyhurst, or 3 of us at Mercyhurst, and then 2 of us have earned advanced degrees because education is a great equalizer. They invested in that. So my mom, when I was being recruited, you know, I had very good grades in high school, and so I was looking at some military academies. I was looking at some Ivy Leagues. But I was only 5'9", even though I lied on my inquiry card that I was 6 foot. I was a 5'9" lineman, so that's not going to get you anywhere other than D3. My mom said, you know, is there any chance, she said to my high school coach, is there any chance that there's a college on the way from Cleveland to Lake Chautauqua that Dave could attend? And, you know, we joked and laughed, ha ha ha. 2 days later, my coach comes running into my typewriting class. I'm taking a senior typewriting class and to get through the year. And he says, Dave, you're not going to believe this. And he shows me the little brochure, and it shows Mercyhurst right between Lake Chautauqua and Cleveland. And so we went and visited. And as we pulled in, it was my mom and my dad. They're sitting in the front seat. I'm in the back. And my mom sees the gates and turns around and says, you're going here. And that is a true story. And then as I went through my visit and got to meet everybody, including Dr. Garvey and Coach DeMeo, Tony DeMeo says, you know, is there anybody any more like you at home? And I go, as a matter of fact, there is. My brother Kevin is a year and a half older than me. We played high school football together at St. Peter's High School in Bedford, Ohio. He was going to walk on in Akron because he was going to Akron at the time. And I went home and said, listen, they got a sibling scholarship. The next sibling gets half off tuition. Let's play ball together. And we roomed together, which was a mistake. After the first term, we figured that out. That was bad after living together our whole lives. But we got to play college football together, and probably get a little emotional here. For my parents to be able to see us, my dad passed away 4 years ago. They loved it. They loved the Mercyhurst, and they loved watching their boys play football. And then my youngest sister, Mary, ended up going to Mercyhurst, and they got to watch her play soccer there. And, it was just a wonderful experience, but it was all because of Chautauqua and my high school football coach.
Well, that's an incredible coincidence that Mercyhurst has been very lucky to have as part of our history. So you mentioned you were a student athlete playing football and very much involved in athletics, I think, your whole life. I know currently you're still a very strong supporter of all athletics. And I think it's worth sharing that you were one of the kind of the legendary Fanatics student athlete fans at your time. And I can very rarely bring up your name without having the term Crazy Dave thrown around. So shed a little on that story, your involvement, how that name came to be. And so we have it, forever recorded in the archives.
I know a lot of people would shy away from this background that I have. I don't. I embrace it because I love it, because it was probably one of the funnest things and to be honest, greatest impacts that I had at Mercyhurst. In high school, we had a Chanel High School, which sadly is a Catholic high school that is no longer in existence. And so that's one of the things that drives me working for Catholic educational institutions, that I will never let that happen for any institution that I work for. And because I have 4 older brothers that went there, I'm in the Hall of Fame there, my parents in the Hall of Fame there, and it no longer exists. And so I just won't let that happen. We had a phenomenal cheering section. It was an all-boys Catholic school at the time, and we were smaller. We were the smaller school in the city, but played all the big Catholic schools in Cleveland, but we had the best cheering section. And so our senior year, we kind of got in trouble one time. And so in order to really support the school, we decided to wear what are called kooky spooks. And you can look this up online back in the 80s. These are Halloween inflatables that you put on your head. And so we had this great cerebral palsy party for kids with cerebral palsy, and we wore those and had a great time with those kids. And so we wore them to the last game that we were seniors for the cheering section, and the place just fell out. It was just unbelievable. So I go to Mercyhurst, and to be honest, not a lot of people came to the basketball games, and that was sad to me because what I was used to in high school. And so we were going to the games and stuff like that, and Billy Caldwell was a coach, did a great job. We had Johnny Green and John Berkeley. We had these great teams, and no one was going to the games. It was just kind of like an older crowd, and it wasn't exciting. And so Phyllis Ayala was the director of housing at the time. And Phyllis had the idea. She wanted to create more spirit. Great idea. She goes, well, I'm going to have a spirit contest for the halls. And so whichever wing wins the contest gets a pizza party. Well, you're talking to a bunch of football players. We all lived in the same wing on the 3rd floor of McCully. My room was 323. I still remember it. And I said that we met, and I just said, the guys were like having these ideas. I go, listen, just follow my lead. I guarantee you we're going to win pizza. And they're like, what are you talking about? I go, don't worry. I got this persona, and I'm going to bring it out. So we did. It was 3 games that the contest was on, and we dressed up as our dads on vacation for the first one. And you can look at the yearbook, and you'll see some great pictures. Then we dressed up as the Blues Brothers, okay, all of us. And then the third one, we did a toga party. So we were all in togas at the game, and then I brought out the kooky spook, the Crazy Dave hat, what is actually technical name, the Wobbling Goblin. And what I would do is go out and get the crowd going by spelling either the Hearst or Lakers, and getting all the crowd going and getting nuts. And to be honest, some of my greatest experience, and from then on, we had a cheering section, and Crazy Dave was chanted to come out all the time and get the crowd going. And one of my greatest athletic achievements, we were playing Cheney State, and I think they were ranked #1 in the country. And we were down by 10 with 5 minutes left. And I got out there, got the crowd going. I'll never forget it. This older woman, she had to be in her 90s. She jumped up and went nuts when I tried to get everybody going, because nobody was excited because we were down. And she jumped up and started screaming, and then everybody jumped up, and we come back and win the game. And at the game's over, and Coach Caldwell comes up to me and gives me a big hug and says, Dave, you won the game. I mean, I got chills just thinking about it. And so my senior year, all these great seniors on our basketball team, I was on the cover. Crazy Dave was on the cover of the last senior basketball program for 1985-86. It's just great. And so this Gannon Gumby that was created was an answer to Crazy Dave, because we were going and upsetting Gannon at the Civic Center and at the Hammer Mill, because I'd be out there on the floor and our teams were great, and we would upset them when nobody beat Gannon back in the day. And that's why Gannon Gumby was created, to answer Crazy Dave, but it was never good, and not as good as Crazy Dave ever.
That's awesome. I've seen some of those older yearbooks. You can see them in the archives. Go back and watch our episode with the archivist a couple weeks back. They're really good, and they certainly tell a strong story. And Lord knows we could use more enthusiasm like that from our students today. So we'll have to, show some film or find some photos to show those.
Yeah, you gotta not be afraid to not be cool. Okay, everybody wants to be cool and calm and collected and have an image. Man, sometimes you just gotta let it loose, and that ends up being the cool thing. And so I've never been afraid of that.
That's awesome. Really cool. So you have a good experience at Mercyhurst, I think, all around. Graduation comes around and you have to kind of think of what's next. Take an interesting path after graduation from Mercyhurst. And I don't want to spoil it, but I think one of the most interesting pieces is you had to be the only assistant football coach in the country to have a law degree. I mean, there just can't be any more than that, than just you. So tell us a little bit about your time right after graduation.
Sure. My whole educational career was dedicated to becoming a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 6 years old. I wanted to be the president of the United States, and I used to read books on the presidents. A lot of them were lawyers. So I thought, okay, that's the path. And so everything I did was to prepare myself for a career in law. When I got to undergrad, and this was the 80s, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to be a corporate litigator on Wall Street. I wanted to make the big money. I wanted to wear the suspenders and the ties and the nice suits and all that kind of stuff. And so that was my goal. And as I always say, there's a funny thing that happened on the way to the forum. So I graduate, and actually Tony DeMeo kind of was prescient about this. He said, Dave, what are you going to do without football? He goes, you love it so much. What are you going to do without it? And I kind of put that in the back burner. Well, I went to law school. When I went to law school, again, my high school football coach was such an influence on me, contacts me and says, Dave, I have a part-time contract for $1,200. I'm going to split it between you and another guy, Joe Keogh, a friend of mine. He goes, you guys can coach the freshman team line. And so I got $600. I figured I could pay for my law school books. Well, our freshman team went undefeated, unscored upon. I loved being a coach, and I fell in love with coaching and education, teaching, if you will. And I decided after I passed the bar exam in Ohio, I took the bar exam. I had 3 legal offers on the table, and I chucked them all and went back to Mercyhurst to be a volunteer football coach, not paid. And I could still hear my mother screaming at me today, because here I was going to be the first professional in the family, first generation college student, and here I'm going to go coach football for nothing. But I always took another job in order to pay my law school bills and so forth and so on. And so I was an academic advisor for Act 101 under Betty Damper and Rich Pagney, and I was a dorm director under Gary Brown. And so, which is totally ironic, because I was probably the worst kid that never got caught as a student, and then here I am, the dorm director, which actually was a bonus, because I told the students right off the bat, you will never do anything ever worse than I did, and I didn't get caught. So I know everything that you're doing. And so Gary always told me I saved a ton of money for Mercyhurst as a hall director. I then took any job that I could in order to keep on coaching, because now I had a goal to be a head football coach. And I actually interviewed for the Mercyhurst head job. That was the dream job. That was my dream job, was to be the head coach at Mercyhurst, to be the first football player to become the head coach in the program. And I came in second or third to Joe Kimball, and worked under Coach Brasington, who was a defensive coordinator when I was a player, worked under Jim Chapman for 3 years, and then Joe Kimball for 3 years, and then was fortunate enough to become a head football coach at Thiel College. And then athletic director, one of the youngest athletic directors in the country. And the bottom line is this, is that I was able to say at my first presidential interview at Thomas More University, after working at 10 years at Notre Dame College with under Andy Roth, that I had either worked in or supervised every single aspect of a college campus. I worked in maintenance when I lived over the summer at Mercyhurst, and so just had this unbelievable experience because I kept on saying yes to opportunities. And so that put me on the line, and so my advice to younger people is 2 things, is that you might have this plan for your life, okay? But when opportunities come, you must take them. And I have this definition of leadership that I use all the time from Lou Holtz. A leader must have vision. A leader must have a plan to implement the vision. A leader must lead by example. A leader must find people with a shared vision. And then the last one, the toughest one, the leader must hold people accountable to the plan. But in the end, there's actually a shorter definition of leadership, and it's saying yes. And so I said yes to all these opportunities that I didn't come out wanting to be a college president at first, but then once I got into it, I saw the impact. And so I started out with a passion for football, but in reality, my passion was for transformative education. I had such a transformative experience at Mercyhurst. I want to give that opportunity to as many students as I can and as many families as I can. And that's what drives me every day.
That's incredible. So my next question was going to be kind of how'd you decide you wanted to be in higher ed administration? And you kind of talked about that a little bit, but was there a moment when you knew you were ready to kind of leave the sidelines of the football field and plant yourself in an office, kind of two different lives there, hang up the whistle, if you will, a moment you kind of felt like that was the right thing to do?
To be honest, it was Dr. Garvey. He wanted to get me out of football and get me into fundraising. I was working under Gary Bukowski. When I left Mercyhurst, I was 7 years, I was an assistant football coach. I was now the offensive coordinator. And again, came in close to be the head coach. I was working under Joe Kimball, great guy and great friend. And I was working under Gary Bukowski as the director of Alumni Relations Annual Fund. And Dr. Garvey said, Dave, we're going to take you out of football. He goes, we want you to learn under Gary and, potentially maybe be a VP for fundraising or development at some point in time. And I just wasn't there yet. I still want to be a head coach for football. So I just wasn't there yet. And so I ended up taking the Teal job and Garvey told me not to. They hadn't won a game in 3 years. They were the losingest program in the country. I took the job. I won my first game as head coach and probably should have retired right there. You learn that lesson. But I had a great experience at Teal. I became an athletic director. A new president came in. I became the enrollment guy, set records with the athletic department and enrollment, turned the football program around, but not enough with the wins to keep the job. It was a great experience, but it was that moment where Garvey saw that my future, and Andy Roth too said this to me one time after I interviewed for the head coaching job at Mercyhurst. He said, Dave, I just think that you're bigger than football. And I actually took offense to that at first because I had such a love for coaching and football. But again, they saw something in me, and I so appreciate their leadership and their mentorship of me, is they saw something more. And as much I love football and love coaching, and I've been able to start 2 football programs at the college level, again, because I was part of the first program at Mercyhurst. I just have that in my DNA. And but they saw something greater. They made me think beyond what I had. I still, would love to be a head football coach at a college again someday, maybe when I retire from being a president. But I guess I could name myself head coach if I really wanted to. But no, they saw something different, and it was the right move because it wasn't football. It was the transformative education experience that I wanted. And again, said yes to opportunities.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at Notre Dame College? I think that was probably the biggest stepping stone into, becoming a college president. Was it fairly quickly in that time you knew you wanted to be the president?
Yeah, Andy Roth was him and Tom Billingsley were the right-hand people for Dr. Garvey, and they did such a wonderful job. And I didn't really ever work under Andy. My buddy Matt Whalen did. And so, but I knew Andy, and Andy ended up being supportive when I became the enrollment person, dean of enrollment, interim dean of enrollment at Teal. I called Andy for advice. And when Andy took the job, I was back in Cleveland. I was a high school athletic director. After I left football, I was trying to decide if I wanted to go back into law or what I was going to do, or back into coaching, and went back home to raise my kids. And Andy called because he was trying to get Matt. The timing wasn't right for him to come to Cleveland. And so he goes, Dave Armstrong's in Cleveland. And so we met, and most certainly we were cut from the same cloth. And I told Andy, I said, Andy, you know me, I'm a great recruiter, but I don't know a damn thing about enrollment. You got to teach me the enrollment side, and we'll kill it. It'll be like killing, shooting fish in a barrel. And we did. Andy was such a great leader, great vision. Notre Dame College was going to close. John Carroll University was going to take them over. They called it a merger. It wasn't a merger. There's never a merger. It's always a takeover. And they decided to go at it alone. They had a good year. based on their goals, and then had 2 disastrous years, and that's when Andy took over. And Andy had this vision, and he's probably the smartest guy I've ever met. And so I was his right-hand man. For 10 years, we ended up increasing enrollment. The first year we brought in the biggest class in the history of the school of 202 students. When I left my last year, as I was the VP of the college and general counsel, we brought in 504 new students. And so we took it from the smallest private college in Ohio to the fastest growing college in the country. And that whole time there, it was about Andy, his needs. He would come to me and say, Dave, I need this. And then I would insert myself into that situation and try to fix it. So I was a problem fixer. One of the big problems was we ended up being at literally the perfect storm. We were at the center. We were the first school that had to deal with the confluence of campus safety, Clery Act, and Title IX. That was a whole new concept. We had a creep on campus who was accused of 6 rapes, which was not true. We kind of had bad cops in our basement, but the whole thing ended up leading to 2 criminal trials, 2 Department of Education investigations, and an NLR and 2 civil lawsuits and an NLRB action. And at the beginning of this whole situation, Andy said, you know, Dave, we were on the news. There was a gotcha thing on the news that we had a rapist running around campus, which again wasn't true. And Andy says, we don't know what's going on right now, but whatever it is, we're going to become a leader in it. We'll fix it and then become a leader in this. I was a former prosecutor while in law school, and he said, Dave, you know, can you navigate us through this? Well, we didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. Well, then next thing you know, I'm considered the higher education attorney on campus safety and Title IX, and that kind of put me on the national stage. But I ended up being Dean of Admissions, Dean of Enrollment, Vice President of Enrollment, Legal Counsel, Vice President of Enrollment, General Counsel, and then we weren't having success in fundraising. I decided to go into that side to help Andy out. We ended up setting records there. So I was VP for Development, General Counsel, and then VP of the college and General Counsel. And then that's when Andy said, you know, Dave, I'm going to retire soon. I want you to be the next guy at Notre Dame. I can anoint you, but I can't appoint you. You need to learn how to go through a search process. It's a very different kind of dance. I know the search consultant at a place called Thomas More. It's right up your alley. You'll never get a job on your first try. Let's get you in there so you can learn. 5 years later, and it was a diocesan Catholic university. There's only 8 left in the country. St. Thomas University, who was going through a failed merger and almost did not exist, heard about me or whatever, and brought me down to look at St. Thomas. So that's kind of how, and of course, when I saw the weather here, obviously, it was real tough to turn it down.
That was truly the ultimate upgrade in weather from, you know, Southern Ohio to South Florida. That's it's hard to complain about that. That's for sure. I think I would assume you learned quite a bit, you know, your first stint as a college president, from kind of day one walking in, dealing with, you know, I think a university has its own set of issues, good, bad, and different. Talk about kind of that early learning experience as a college president. What maybe surprised you, both, like I said, good and bad, and what you learned along the way at Thomas More?
If I could get my thoughts together, 3 things is, number one is, at this point in my life, because of my experience at Mercyhurst as a student, and then as an administrator, and then at Thiel College, where we turned around that university at the time, that college at the time, and then Notre Dame, working under Andy, turning that around, and then turning around Thomas More. We turned around Notre Dame in about 5 years. It takes 7 years to turn around an educational institution. That's what research says. And we turned around Notre Dame in 5 years. We were able to turn around Thomas More in 3.5. And I'm happy to say here at St. Thomas University, we've turned it around in a year and 10 months. We now have an operating surplus for the first time in many, many years. And there are 20 things that I know that are happening behind the door of a fiscally failing institution. When I say, it's very important I say fiscally failing. There were wonderful things happening here at St. Thomas University and all those other institutions that we're talking about. But in the end, no margin, no mission. And if you don't have the fiscal house in order, it's not going to be here. And so there's usually 20 things that you can predict are happening. You got to now attack all 20. You got to kind of boil the ocean. And how do you boil the ocean? It's like eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time. And so revenue streams is number one. You got to come in and immediately fix the revenue streams. So that's number one, is that you know that there's 20 things that are happening. You got to attack those. Number two, I'll say is when you come into a turnaround situation is everything that they tell you is not true. Okay, is the finances are going to be way worse than you think. The situation is going to be way worse. The culture is going to be way worse. And so those are all, no matter what they tell you, it's going to be worse. So you have to prepare yourself. I always use the analogy of the movie Parenthood. It's one of my wife and I's favorite movie. And at the end, to give it away if you haven't seen it, the old lady, the grandmother, talks about whether she loves roller coasters or merry-go-round. And she says the merry-go-rounds just go in the same place over and over again. I love the roller coaster because it scares me and it's exciting and it's thrilling. That's how I am as a person. But as a college president, you have to be on a merry-go-round. You can't do the highs and you can't do the lows because no matter how great it gets one day, something really bad's coming the next day. And so you got to be even keel, and that is not my personality. And so that's been something I've had to learn to do because in the end, it's always worse than everybody thinks it is. Lastly, and this is very important, this goes for any business. It's about the people. When I was younger, as a first head coach, and I thought I could change the world and win the national championship and all this stuff by myself. Nope. I learned I'm not as good as I ever thought I was. You go out and find people better than you. You get them in, and you break down obstacles for them, and you make them. They make you look great, and that's what you do. It's about building teams. And so, I have a board member here who has a great line. Dave, there's Joe Lacker. There's two ways to change a culture. Number one, change the people. Number two, change the people. And that's not saying anybody's a bad person, okay? But when you need to change the culture, that is the quickest, fastest, and best way. And it ends up being good for both entities. Because if you're in a negative situation and going in the wrong direction and are not willing to change, I'm still friends today with people I've actually let go at places. Very good friends. Because I told them at the time, listen, you're going to hate me at this moment. But there's going to be a time where you're going to call me and say, you know what, Dave, this is the best thing that ever happened, is that we separated ways. And that has happened a lot. And so you want to be in a situation where you're moving forward and it's positive. And so those would be three major things I would say is that when you walk into a presidency. And the last thing I'll say is this. Being a head football coach was the best preparation to be a president. Not being a vice president or general counsel, all that stuff. No. Because when you're a head football coach, everybody knows the job better than you. They know all the better plays to call. They know all the better players to play in the game. They know everything way more than you, number one. Number two is you never get the information you need. Everybody's always blowing smoke up your behind, okay? You never get the information you need. You need people that you can trust to get the information. And I always say being a college president is just like being a head football coach. It's like being naked on the top of a flagpole. That's what it's like to do the job. So if you're not willing to do that and understand that, then it's a lot tougher to do this gig.
That's really interesting. You and Jim Tressel should write a book about the transition from head football coach to college president, because you both seem to have exceeded at it and have some good Ohio roots to go along with it for sure.
You know, and I'll just add, you know, people say, what are the things that you use every day on a daily basis? To be honest, is what I learned on the football field. You know, Tony DeMeo had a line that we used to put on t-shirts and signs, and I use it every day. Hard work, discipline, and a positive attitude. That's what gets me through this job. That's what helps me be a better president. It's about hard work. It's about having discipline to hold to the plan. And it's about being positive no matter what the challenges are, like we're dealing with COVID. So hard work, discipline, and positive attitude, things I learned on the field of play, I use every day.
So tell us a little bit more about St. Thomas. I mean, you mentioned it was kind of in maybe a rough spot, and that one of the things that drew you down there, but I'm sure there was more appealing than that, and just the weather, and then kind of maybe some of the changes you made early on in your tenure.
Sure. So St. Thomas has a wonderful, wonderful history. It says that we were founded in 1961 as Biscayne College for Men here at our current location in Miami Gardens, originally Opa-locka. And then became St. Thomas University in 1984 and started the law school then. And then we actually we're almost 80% minority students here. A majority of those are Hispanic, so we're a Hispanic majority serving institution. And we really reflect Miami. But the history actually goes before that. In 1946, Santo Tomas de Villanueva was founded by Augustinian priests from Philadelphia in Havana, Cuba, as the first private school and first Catholic university in Cuba. and actually had women before anybody else had women in colleges and universities in Cuba. And in 1961, Fidel Castro himself invaded the campus, took over the campus during the revolution, and put those Augustinian priests up against the wall to kill them, and chopped off the head of Santo Tomas statue. And I have some alumnus that want me to get that statue back. And so they eventually made it out safely, and immediately brave priests and brothers started St. Thomas or Biscayne College for Men. And so it's this great history that again mimics Miami, because Miami, the success of Miami can be directly related to the Pedro Pan families that were, and the children that were sent out. They call them Peter Pan kids, that came to Miami and became just wonderful additions to Miami and the culture, and built this into a global city. And so that was the exciting thing for me, is to, Thomas More is wonderful. We were able to turn that around. I expected to be there for a long time. My son was attending the school. But when I knew Monsignor Casal, who had been the president here for 25 years, and I knew he was going to retire like 2 years before he did, because I didn't know about the merger. Well, then once I found out about that, at that time, Thomas More was in a great place. And basically after all the stuff, I realized that St. Thomas needed me as another Catholic entity, Catholic diocesan school that needs to survive, not only survive, but thrive. And it was a very, very, very tough decision. But I just felt that St. Thomas needed me more. Thomas More was on a great trajectory, and St. Thomas needed me more. So when we came in, it was very dire, and basically I brought in a team. The team is phenomenal. We immediately hit the enrollment side. So in the last year, we brought in the largest class in the history of the school by almost 50%. We had 300 brought in the year before. When I started August 1st, we brought in 605 students the next year. And we had our largest fundraising ever in the history of the university, $10.7 million. 2015, they had 10.5. And so, and then the best part is US News and World Report, which I don't like. Okay, they're college rankings. I don't like them because all they do is perpetuate the elites. And if you're like elites, then great, you like US News and World Report, but I don't like them. I just don't like their metrics until now. Why? They have a new metric. It's called social mobility. Universities that take the lowest financial students, Pell eligible, and what they do with them 10 years after they graduate, catapulting them to the higher financial strata. The first ranking ever this past year in the South, the #1 school, St. Thomas University. And that has nothing to do with me. It has to do with everybody. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And for us to have record enrollment, record fundraising, and be #1 in social mobility, we just actually launched our new strategic plan, Limitless. We believe that our goals are limitless and our potential is limitless.
Wow, that's impressive. Congratulations on all those accomplishments. It's certainly impressive. Just a reminder for anybody out there watching, if you have a question, please feel free to send it into the chat. If we run out of time and don't get to those, we'll certainly be sending them on to Dave, and I'm sure he'll be kind enough to answer via email, and we'll get that taken care of. So the last few months have been crazy for everything around the world, but particularly for higher education. Can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted your campus, kind of how you reacted right away, and maybe, kind of what you're looking forward to for the fall?
Yeah, let me go to 50,000 feet first. And if you go to our website and look at our strategic plan, you'll see some documents in there. And it starts with the seminal letter or article written by Jeff Salingo, the foremost higher ed writer from Arizona State University, in New York Times all the time, and Chronicle. He wrote a seminal article in 2013 after MOOCs came out. If you remember MOOCs, Massive Open Online Free Courses, everyone thought that was going to be the disruption for higher ed. And he said at the time, he said, listen, he said, the disruption in higher education is coming. Out of the 4,000 colleges and universities in this country, only 400 to 500 have the fiscal strength to survive the disruption. That's scary. The schools that are most vulnerable are smaller, faith-based, underfunded, underendowed, tuition-driven institutions. That puts this target squarely on the back of Mercyhurst, my alma mater, and every school I've worked at in St. Thomas University. So I quote from that article a lot. And it's my goal. So now, knowing that, that's the challenge. Statistically, or personally, I believe that my Mercyhurst education is the best education anyone can receive, and St. Thomas University education. But statistics would prove us out. AQ did a study that showed that students who attend smaller faith-based liberal arts institutions have a higher grade point average, graduate sooner, that means with less debt, and here's very important, go on to earn a terminal degree in their field more often than any other student. You would think it was the big research universities. They were freaked out by that answer, so they went back and did more research and found out why. It's because of the mentoring that happens with faculty. Smaller class sizes, personal relationships, and I got to give a shout out to Barry Grossman, who just passed away, who was my academic advisor. He and Dr. Garvey were my academic mentors, and he did so much for me and taught me so much. I never had a law class that was as hard as his pre-law class at Mercyhurst. And so he prepared me, and he wrote my letter of recommendation for law school. So God bless you, Barry. Thank you. And so those statistics are real. And so I would argue that it's the best education, but now the target's squarely on our back. The disruption's coming now. Everyone thought it was going to be MOOCs. Well, maybe it's not going to be MOOCs. Maybe it's going to be COVID. Maybe it's going to be MOOCs 3.0, but it's coming. My goal is to put my university on the train and not at the station. And so when that tsunami comes, I want to be on a surfboard riding it. I don't want to be swallowed by it. I believe that our institutions will not only survive, but thrive by using a bifurcated approach. We all know the bricks and mortar, face-to-face, stage on the stage education that we all know and love. That's all about character formation, and it's needed, and we should keep it. However, no one's willing to fund it anymore. You need to have a bifurcated approach where we also do quality online learning, mission-centric quality online learning for lifelong learners. And that's how we're going to not only survive, but thrive in the disruption of higher education. In my opinion, if you don't do that, it's going to be tough. Are there elite liberal arts schools that could be bricks and mortar and be that way forever? Yes, because of their endowments and their alumni and all that stuff, but the majority, in my opinion, you got to take that bifurcated approach. And so everywhere I've been, that's what we've worked on, which gets me to COVID. Long point to get to the COVID. Dr. Garvey, Andy Roth taught me a long time ago, never waste a crisis. So when the COVID hit, everybody obviously was freaking out, and you could either roll up in a ball and go into the corner, or you can say, you know what, we're going to find opportunities in crisis. I met with my enrollment team right off the bat for the law school, the adult, online, traditional, met with all the recruiters and said, listen, you want me to, I know you think I'm going to lower your goals today on this Zoom call. Nope, we're raising our goals. Because for the first time in your life, in your recruiting life, no one's bothering you. You don't have to coach a game. You don't have to go to meetings. All you have to do is recruit. And for the first time in your recruiting life, you know where the students are. The students are at home. Right now, we're actually running ahead of last year. They took it and ran. Number two, we are a better university today because of COVID. On March 16th, the day before we went virtually online for everything, and faculty will enjoy this if there's any faculty listening, we say things are mandatory as administrators, and faculty maybe do it at 30% to 50%. So we have a learning management system, Canvas. Probably 50% of our faculty were using it, even though they were all supposed to use it. Well, guess what? On March 17th, 100% of our faculty were using Canvas, and we are a better university because now they love it, they're using it, and they're teaching better, and that's what we're doing. And so we embrace the opportunity, the crisis to find opportunities. This sign behind me, this is another great example. So you know those high school signs you see around your neighborhoods or grade school signs when kids graduate? Well, one of my board members saw that here in Miami, and he said, Dave, why don't we do that? And I said, you know, I always thought about doing that, but whenever I brought it up, everybody say, oh, that's too cheesy, it's too grade school, it's too high school, don't do that. I said, you know what, George, but we were all, it just ended up being so big, and we talked about doing it for law school. We were like, no, law school's too, professional. The law students and their parents were calling us, where's my sign? Where's my sign? We ended up making so many signs. Kids were asking for them in California. We had to send them. It was great. So again, just a little thing, but made people happy during the COVID crisis. And so that's how we want to approach this. And so now for the fall, I've came out early and said we will open. okay, with our guidelines, but telling everyone we cannot guarantee you're not going to get the virus. Okay, we got to say that, and because personal responsibility is key. But we are doing what we're calling Bobcat Go. We're going to be face-to-face, but every class we teach is also going to be done virtually, so that if a student feels uncomfortable, they can take the class virtually. If they're not feeling well and they can stay in their dorm that day, they got the class virtually. If a faculty member has health issues, they can teach it virtually, but we're going Bobcat Go. We're doing it both ways. And at the law school, everything. And so we're very excited about this. Again, I believe that we're a better university today than we were before the COVID.
That's really good. You maybe reflected on some of this a little bit at the beginning of your last answer, but you've been in higher education now quite a while. You've been a president since 2013, I think. Has your outlook on higher education changed in that time, or any, top lesson learned maybe that you'd want to share?
I didn't know that I was going to have to spend as much time in Tallahassee, in Frankfurt, Columbus, and Capitol Hill in DC as a college president. Didn't realize that part, okay? Because funding and the politics is everything. So let me go back up to 100,000 feet, okay? There's a great book that I recommend to everyone. Joshua Charles, a millennial, who took 5 years while he was going to law school at George Washington to write a book called Liberty's Secrets, The Lost Wisdom of the Founders, of the Founding Fathers. In that book, we learned from the founders that in order to have a self-governing republic, and this is very prescient to today, we need to have the citizenry of a self-governing republic must have, the founders said, these two characteristics. They must have virtue, i.e. morality, and knowledge, i.e. education. For the founders, they believed that developing a moral code must come from within. It cannot come from the king. It cannot come from the government. It cannot come from the president. It must come from within. And for them, the best way to establish that moral code was through the practice of religion, whether individually, with an organization, whatever. It's not the only way, but for them, they felt it was the best way. We know that secularism has been rising and the practice of faith has gone down. So that's a major red flag for a self-governing republic. Knowledge, i.e. education. The founders believed in self-education, home education, public education, private education. They were the most educated people to ever found a country in the history of our civilization. Prove me wrong. The problem here is for the first time in our country's history, people don't want to fund education. For the first time across the aisle, neither side wants to fund education. Families don't want to fund education. It's a scary time. Yet, if you look at the facts, the greatest return on investment anyone could make in their lifetime, better than the stock index, better than gold, better than silver, better than anything, is to get a college degree. And so why I do what I do is to give as many students possible the experience I had at Mercyhurst, but to educate great citizens for this self-governing republic, okay, so we can continue the self-governing republic by having virtue and knowledge. And at faith-based universities, in my opinion, that's where it gets done the best and the most, and that's it. And so that's what drives me. And so the future of education, in my opinion, is the smaller faith-based institution that is developing great United States self-governing republic citizens because they have virtue and knowledge.
That's really good. That's really well said. Very good stuff. So I want to kind of close with one that's maybe a little less deep and intense, but my favorite question perhaps to ask everybody. What's your favorite part about Mercyhurst? And you can take that however you want it.
My wife. Like many of you, I met my spouse at Mercyhurst. And I don't know if we have the time or not, but it's a great story.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So for some miracle, me and my roommates, even though we were all sophomores and my brother Kevin was a junior, there were 6 of us, we got Townhouse 1. And that created a big problem on campus because there was all these seniors that wanted Townhouse 1 because that was the party house. Well, we got it. And to be honest, we got it because of Crazy Dave, because Phyllis loved Crazy Dave. And so Phyllis ended up regretting that. She sent us a letter one time. She said, you guys have had parties every weekend where you're charging $2 a cup. We didn't charge for beer. We charged $2 for a cup, I would argue, as a lawyer.
The lawyer.
But we had 26 straight weeks of a party, so that she said by Pennsylvania definition, we were running a speakeasy. So we were going to get thrown out. Well, after that party that night, we decided to have a party we called it the speakeasy party. The next morning, we decided, because we were all had ultimate clarity in life, and we were doing so well and smart at that moment, we should go get a dog, which of course is against the violations. So we went to the Erie Humane Society. Me and all our guys walked in, and my buddy, we called him Chester Molester, but Paul Mack, big guy, 6'5", 500 pounds at the time. We walk in and we're looking at the dogs, and this girl comes out who's working there, and I see her and I fell in love with her the moment I saw her. And she looked at Chet and said, I know you. You run the Clippers Cove. He was an HM, hospitality management. And she goes, yeah. And she goes, well, I go to Mercyhurst too. I live in Macaulay. She lived in the one wing that the girls were in. And I'm just like, oh my God, I was totally smitten. Well, it comes out later that she actually thought that my brother Kevin and my buddy Don Gibbon were very good looking, which they were, way better looking than me. But it worked out that we got the dog sick a couple times, and I'd say, hey, I'll go get that girl over at Macaulay. And by the third time she came over, she wanted to know what I was doing. So, it's all about persistence and hard work. And, Leslie Heffenmeyer is her maiden name, so the Heffenmeyer School of Education, that's her parents. And sadly, she lost her dad 2 years ago and her mom this past year, but they left their legacy at Mercyhurst. And so that's number one is Leslie. And then, I just say all my friends that I met, and then the football. I'm so excited about the work that you're doing for the 43 Union for football. It had such an impact. All the challenges that we have today, I'm gonna be honest with you, you don't have those on the football field. Color's not there. We were blue and green. And you learn those lessons out there. And to be honest, if we all acted more like a football program and or an athletic team, where it's all about being together and teamwork and unity and production, and it doesn't matter who or where you're from or anything like that, we'd have a better country. And so, I love being student government president and leading. I was an RA, just really got involved in the whole experience. And that's what I'm always encouraging our students to do, is to just say yes, take the opportunities, get involved. And then, of course, I would say to any alumni watching or administrators, give back, because our schools are important.
That's really good. And it's really good to see the breadth of experience you brought to your job. And obviously your passion for football still resides, because I think I count 5 footballs sitting in your office behind you. I don't know do any of them have a Mercyhurst logo on them?
Those are at home.
All right.
Those are at home. I actually have a football signed by all the kids at Notre Dame College when we beat Mercyhurst.
I don't like that. That one doesn't.
I know that was a tough one. I'll tell you another thing about this job that's pretty special. When I was sitting at my desk at Thomas More and had the job, Monsignor Casal sent me an email, and I started to read it, and I couldn't get through the email because I started crying. It says, oh, Dave, by the way, I forgot to tell you, as the president of a South Florida college, you are officially an ex officio member of the Orange Bowl committee. And I didn't read anything after that, because I'm thinking, here's this little Division III guy who's going to be on the Orange Bowl committee, where the greatest Division I football games of all time and national championships have been played. And I'm now on that committee. And that is pretty special. So the helmet you see back there is University of Florida, and the other side of that helmet is Virginia, University of Virginia. Last year's Orange Bowl. And then the other helmet is Alabama and Oklahoma. And the fact that I get to go to these meetings with Brady Quinn, who was a quarterback for the Browns, and John Vilma, and it's just nuts, man. I was telling this to some high school friends the other day. I said, I go to these meetings, I go to my country club and all that stuff, and I just think that they're going to figure me out and throw me out. And I just sit there and kind of giggle until somebody wants to throw me out. It's a dream come true. It's just crazy. So I am extremely blessed. Wonderful family and great opportunities. And I would say a majority of that goes to my parents and my experience at Mercyhurst.
That's really good. And that's a perfect way to end. Dave, we're incredibly proud of you as an institution for all you've accomplished. Grateful for you and Leslie and obviously her extended family for everything that you've done for Mercyhurst and continue to do. We're lucky to call you one of ours, and can't wait to have you back on campus again sometime soon. We wish you the best of luck and everything, obviously at St. Thomas, and feel free to send us some warm weather, when it gets too hot and you have the abundance of it. We can use it for much of the year, as you remember.
Yeah, we got plenty of it. We'll share it.
That's good. I want to remind everybody we'll be back again next week. We're hosting Michelle Scully. She is our campus minister here on the campus. She's going to share some updates about campus ministry, how programs have grown in the past couple of years, and obviously talk about how COVID-19 has impacted, what they do on a daily basis and how we're still able to really reach out to students through some of these challenging times. So please join us next week for that. You can view all the recordings and future listings on the website that Lindsay has posted in the chat. We hope to see everybody again next week. Dave, once again, thanks very much.
God bless you, Ryan. Appreciate it. You see, I wore my Mercyhurst pin, my STU pin, and I wore my Mercyhurst tie and my Mercyhurst colors. So go blue and green, go Lakers, go Bobcats. God bless everybody.
Same to you, Dave. Carpe diem. Thanks again for the time. We'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody.